This video will help you identify a buyer on eBay that may potentially be trouble. As a seller on eBay, you may from time to time encounter buyers who are really more of scam artists than they are buyers. So let's take a look at how you can figure that out using some feedback. Typically, when you look at a buyer's feedback, you'll probably see a lot of good feedback. As a seller, it's actually very difficult to leave bad feedback for your buyer unless there was some sort of issue raised with the transaction. Most sellers want to leave positive feedback in the hopes that the buyer will leave positive feedback as well. So when you look at the general feedback, most of it is going to be positive. You may see one negative feedback or a couple negative feedbacks here and there. You can check those out, but even those are usually non-issues. It's difficult to really determine if a buyer is going to be trouble based on a little bit of negative feedback, particularly when that is coming from a buyer, not a seller. You want to know about seller's feedback for your buyer. The place to find this information is the feedback that this particular buyer has left for others. So go ahead and click on feedback left for others. When the page loads, usually you'll see a lot of positive feedback left. Sometimes you'll see a little bit of negative here and there. But overall, if you have a good buyer, you should see a fair amount of good positive feedback here. Let's take a look at what a bad buyer looks like. Again, all of your buyer's feedback is typically very good in his feedback score. Even when you look at the negative feedback, there's only a couple, and it's tough to determine who's really at fault with these just very few negative feedbacks. But with a bad buyer, when you look at feedback left for others, this can be very telling. Negative feedback, worked things out, not satisfied with the product but got a refund. Negative feedback again, problem was solved, had to get refund for damaged item. Great customer service and issue resolved, problem was solved, horrible. Negative feedback, negative, negative. Worked things out with the seller, more negative. This particular buyer has left nearly 25 negative feedbacks, and even the positive feedbacks indicate that there was some sort of issue with the seller. This indicates that this buyer is raising issue with every seller that he works with, typically meaning he's abusing the buyer protection program and getting a lot more refunds than he really should be entitled to. When you see a buyer with this type of feedback that he or she has left for others, beware. Don't lower your prices at all for a buyer like this. In fact, if the buyer has not purchased from you yet, I would recommend that you block this buyer. I hope this video will help you spot a bad buyer and avoid them at all costs.